Good morning, friends. Welcome once again to another daily dose from your Covid Chaplain down here in Australia. G'day. And we picked up yesterday, as we move toward the end of 2020, a look at this subject that I'm calling Seeing Clearly. Yesterday was Seeing Clearly Day, and through this week we want to build on that theme. I told you yesterday that there are times when we see things but don't actually see them. We need someone else to point it out to us. And when we look at what they're telling us to see, we think, oh, you're right. That actually is the way you're pointing it out. I hadn't noticed. And I want to make sure that since 2020 is the year of vision, that you have actually seen what God was revealing to you during this year. Now, yesterday, I pointed out probably the most important thing that we saw during 2020, which is man's impotence. That in the face of a global pandemic, which is what we were told it was, it didn't turn out to be that, it's just like the flu. But at the time we thought it was a global pandemic, we actually expected tens of millions of people to die around the world. And as it turns out, no more people died this year that hasn't finished yet. No more people have died this year than die normally in any given year. So there was no excessive death. There was no pandemic. We all thought there was. And because of that, people were terrified. People were fearful, ready to do whatever they were told to do. People were wearing masks. They were kept within a limited area around their homes. Some people weren't even allowed to go outdoors in some places. We were here in Victoria. We're limited to a 5-kilometre zone that we were allowed to operate in. People were told to keep 1.5 meters away from other people. All the normal things of life were shut down, like schools and churches and workplaces. Sporting events were cancelled and just so much disruption. Now, that happened, and it showed us that it didn't matter how much money we had in the bank. It didn't matter how big our house was or how impressive our car was or what title we carried in our workplace. We were all just leveled. None of those things gave us the ability to push back against a pandemic. Suddenly we saw our weakness, actually our impotence. We were powerless against such a thing. And there were very wealthy people, famous people, people who had won awards and were known around the world or within their country, who couldn't sleep at night for fear they were going to die. All that other stuff they had on their side did not protect them, insulate them from the possibility of dying of a pandemic. So here we have this situation where the first thing we saw was that we within ourselves, and even with our collection of material goods or self-importance in our own community, those things are powerless. We don't within ourselves have the power to guarantee our safety or to guarantee that we can live differently to everybody else when it comes to something like this. I want to take you today, though, to the next very important thing that we saw during this year. And it's a rather sad thing to say that we saw it, because it's not a thing we'd like to know was the truth. And that is that governments around the world were no longer working really for the good of their people. They were actually doing what they were told by people outside the country, pulling the strings and telling them what to do. Now, we had the World Health Organization and Centers for Disease Control and other people, and our governments just went along with whatever those people said was important and what we should do. And even though there were research scientists, even in our own countries, let alone people around the world who were highly qualified to look at what was happening, and they were saying the information we're being given and the directions we're being told to follow are not wise, we should stop and think about this, our governments didn't stop and they didn't think. They actually did what they were told by other people whom they'd agreed to obey. And suddenly we find that the idea that we, as the people, vote for our representatives and they represent us and we work together for the good of our nation, our leaders were not listening to us. They didn't really want to be bothered representing us. They followed orders from outside of the country, doing what some global scheme or global plan seemed to be. And they were doing all the things that they were basically told to do. In fact, there were practiced scenarios a decade ago to prepare whole nations for what to do if there was a pandemic of a COVID kind of disease. So when it came along, they already knew what their instructions were. They knew that they were to do lockdown, they were to insist on masks, that they were to keep social distancing, all of these things. They were pre-programmed to do them. And then when all the experts said, we can't find proof that there is a disease, We can't find that it's killing people. It seems to be nothing more than just another flu. We should stop and take stock. Our governments didn't do it. They didn't stop. They didn't stop and get together all the experts and have their own discussion about what was going on and come to what we as the people in our country wanted to happen. They kept listening to instructions from outside the country. Now, we know that there are globalist agendas, people that want a one world government. We know that ultimately the Bible tells us there will be a ruler who will rule the whole of the world. It will be a one world government under a character that we know of as the Antichrist. So we're kind of a bit sensitive about this one world government thing, people taking over our nations and stopping us from just being ourselves and doing what we believe is the right thing for us and our country. And that's what we began to see during 2020. It was obviously already happening, but we saw it far more clearly, and we still see it. We see places where people are doing what they seem to be being told to do, while their own people are protesting and saying, we don't want this. This is not, let's sit down and have a discussion. Or no, we're not getting a discussion. Let's get the experts together. No, we're not getting the experts together. Let's get some proper research and get all the people and their information together and see what's really going on. No, we're not going to do that. We're just going to follow the program of what we've been told to do. Now, that's a rather ugly thought. It's a rather ugly thought to think that the people we voted for as to represent us are not representing us at all. They're actually following some instructions from somewhere else. And that's been made perfectly plain to us in 2020. We're still seeing it in many places around the world. And so we just see that now we have a dual problem that we have to deal with. One is that we're weak and powerless. And two, that there's a tide of evil, a tide of something that wants to just take over our nations and control us from outside the countries. That seems to be really well advanced, like it's well entrenched. And we've got political leaders who just go along with it. These are the people we thought were good. We thought they were on our side. They're just going along with the program. And suddenly we can see things that we don't really want to see. Things that we wished we wouldn't be able to see because they wouldn't be true, but now we see them. And so a lot of people are saying, no, I can't see it. I don't want to see it. I don't want to believe it. No, it's not true. No, the pandemic is real. We need this. We must follow our leaders. And I can understand that. There's a sense of shock when we discover something about ourselves or about the world in which we live that we don't like. It would be nicer to be able to pretend it wasn't true and then hope it goes away. I think sadly for all of us, what we are seeing is reality, and it's God's gift to us. In the year of vision, he pulled back the curtain and said, have a look and see what's really happening in your world. You are nowhere near as clever, nowhere near as successful, nowhere near as safe as you think you are with your money and your society and your job and all the things that you found security in. You need God. We all need God, far more than we realize that we do. And so God has stripped away the things that we relied on to show us that we need him. He's also shown us that there are forces amassing around us that we are impotent to be able to resist. The very people who should be representing us and caring about us are actually betraying us. They're playing along with someone else's game. And we don't really know what the game is. All we know is that they're not listening to us. And they seem to be doing what they're being told to do. And that's a whole issue that we have to try and deal with in 2021. What are we going to do in response to that? Well, I said yesterday, and I'd better say it again now, because these are unpleasant things to think about, and maybe people are thinking, oh, what's going to happen? Hey, I believe we're about to step in to the most exciting time that probably in the whole of my life, and I've been alive for a long time. I think we're stepping into a really exciting season. And the reason God's shown us what I'm talking about yesterday and today, the things that we don't really want to see, the reason God's showing us those things is so that we will recognize our need to rely upon God. And then in finding God's work in our lives, we will rise up in strength and wisdom to know what to do about the very issues that have become evident to us in 2020. So I'm really excited. I really am. And by the end of the week, I hope I can share a bit of that excitement with you, especially when I get to maybe on New Year's Day. I'll actually tell you what I see as the plan for the year that's coming ahead. Very exciting. I believe that God is calling us to be really people of action and people of power in his hands. I'll discuss that more in the next couple of days. Right now, recognize that God is giving you the gift of sight. Don't close your eyes. Don't pretend it isn't there. Truth sets you free. Accept the realities that you may not even like to admit are happening. And just take stock of them. Recognize that they are there. And as you do, as you recognize that, come before God and say, God, what I'm seeing shows me I really do need you. I'm powerless within myself, and I'm powerless against evils I don't really understand that seem to be massing and mounting up around me. I call upon you to be my strength and my shield. So as we see clearly, today we are seeing evil, and seeing evil on a grand scale. But as you see that, don't be fearful. Know that God has everything under control. Trust yourself to him. Keep your eyes open. Accept the things God is showing you. And let's get ready for a very exciting year. I'll talk to you more about this tomorrow. But meanwhile, think about these things, and as you do, may God bless you.